Hello. Today we're doing another video in the rune series, the fairly slow-going rune series. I'm sorry that it takes so long between entries in this one, but I can't really promise I'm going to do them more often than I do them right now. But I guess hopefully in between that time you've been studying the runes in your own way and through other sources. You know, there's all kinds of books, a lot of them not that great, but some of them are very good. You know, generally anything by Edward Thorson is pretty good, and there are some newer ones, you know, that have done some good work with it. And more than anything, maybe that you've been studying them on your own and looking back at the videos. Eventually, when this series is complete, it won't be a problem because everybody will just click the playlist. But for those of you that are following along right now, I ask you for patience. So today's rune is the rune Kenaz, which is the letter K. And that's Kenaz right there. Actually, should be pointing that way. There you go. So, again, Kenaz, the rune letter K. You can see it's a very simple rune. And Kenaz means a torch. So it represents light, illumination, enlightenment, vision. Now, there's an interesting detail to Kenaz. Every other rune we've looked at so far emerges out from the well of weird. It goes out in some form. Sometimes it expresses itself in some way. Sometimes it returns to the well of weird. But it's always coming out of that. It's going on a vertical line from this base, which we call the well of weird, which is to say the flowing of time, right? Of space-time, right? So Kenaz is the very first rune, not the only one that we'll see, but it's the first rune that we'll see that does not come out of the well of weird, right? Like, imagine that that's the well of weird down there. Kenaz is not coming out in a line from it. It's just floating above it, right? It's just out there somewhere. And I think that's a very interesting detail. The torch, Kenaz is a torch. You can see, well, it comes out in angles, right? It's shooting outwards. So you could imagine that's the light projecting out. But it's nothing that's coming from below, right? So every other rune we've seen so far emerges out of space and time, right? But Kenaz and a few other runes that we'll see later on are existing above space and time. They're already rooted in eternity, right? They're not tied into space-time as a phenomenon, right? And I think this is a very interesting detail about this rune because it means that it connects to the symbol of the torch, and it means that it's something that's happening that is outside of what you could say is the flow of time, of linearity, or anything like that, right? So in the context of the torch, of illumination, right, I think that emphasizes that Kenaz represents a flash of insight, what you could call it, right? Inspiration, something coming completely out of left field, right? Where suddenly you see the light, right? And you understand something that you didn't understand before, right? But in a way that isn't a process of a natural outgrowth of logical deduction, but instead it's a sudden revelation, right? And it opens up your vision and your mind to things, right? So it's light flashing out, and then suddenly you go, aha, right? And it's one of those kinds of moments. It's a eureka moment, right? So Kenaz can represent that kind of insight, sudden vision, sudden understanding. In a spiritual sense, Kenaz is associated with initiation, with the process of becoming initiated, right? Of entering into a mystery, right? Where in a lot of initiation rituals, the first level of initiation, before when you're one of the profane, you're one of the outsiders, you're brought to the door of the temple, and then you're in some way impaired in your vision, right? You're blindfolded, and then you're led into the temple, blind, right? Unable to see. And there's a crucial moment in the initiation rite. In almost all the Western mysteries, you see this in some form or another, where your blindfold is removed, your bonds are removed, and you can see the light. And usually the first thing you're meant to see is some kind of a core symbol that expresses the essence of the mystery of the order or of the school that you've entered into. So this is a very important detail. It's that moment where light is shown in the darkness, right? And so it dispels ignorance, it dispels obscurantism, and then you can see what is true. So I think that's the central message of the Kenaz rune. It's this thing that comes from outside anything you do in particular. It's not tied into your linearity, you could say. And it provides a sudden revelation that changes everything, right? That changes you. Right? There's one other detail about the Kenaz rune, is that in the traditional runic attributions or runic poems, there's one point that it says Kenaz is harmful to children, right? And you can think of this in this kind of literal sense, right? A little kid sees the fire of the torch he wants to tell you, he gets burned, right? So it can be dangerous, right? The torchlight, it's a light that shines, that illuminates, but it can also be a light that burns if you're not properly prepared for it, right? If you're not mature enough for it, right? And of course, this has an initiatory sense too, right? That some revelations, part of the reason why mystery schools, secret societies, and initiatory teachings veil their teachings, they hide them from people, or they work in a progressive way, is because the same illumination, the same teaching, to someone who doesn't have the prerequisites for it, can do harm instead of good, right? And so a certain revelation in the hands of someone who has not yet done the fundamental work to be prepared for it, a revelation that is of something that is true can be not true to them if they haven't put themselves in a place where they can understand the truth of it. And then it becomes false, right? If you tell someone who is prepared to understand a statement like, reality is an illusion, then for that person it'll mean one thing. But for someone who isn't, someone who hasn't been doing the fundamental work that's required beforehand to understand the simple symbolic message, they could take that as a instruction to not bother with anything, right? If reality is an illusion, then why do anything, right? Or they could be psychologically devastated by this revelation, right? If they could choose to believe it instead of internalizing it, right? They could say, okay, well, because you told me that reality is an illusion, then reality is an illusion, right? So these mysteries, the type of illumination that Kenaz provides is a fiery truth, right? A fiery truth that you have to be ready for. And if it comes at a time when you're not ready for it, then it's going to cause tremendous upheaval for you. It could be dangerous, right? And you have to be in a stage where this flash of insight will be something that that serves you, and that you can contain and you can direct, and not something that just burns. That's everything for today.